Welcome to the Longevity Protocol with Dr. Cristina Bosch and Dr. John A. Robinson. We'll be your guides to uncovering the secrets to optimal health, better sex, and happiness. From debunking aging myths to exploring the science behind what it means to live the Longevity Protocol, we'll dive into a wide range of topics. So, get ready for an exhilarating journey in what it means to live well and feel your very best at any age. Let's talk about men, testosterone, how that testosterone is declining.
Yeah.
And here's a big thing. Let's talk about what is perceptibly a war on masculinity itself.
Perceptibly? There's our bias.
Yeah, right.
Done.
Obviously, right?
All right, go.
So testosterone for guys, maybe we can talk a little bit about what it does, why it's important,
Yes.
and what's happening to natural testosterone levels in guys. Why is it going down? And then is that sort of, again, everything can sound like a conspiracy theory nowadays, but apparently the difference between a conspiracy theory and reality is about 6 months, is what they say.
That's funny.
Right? So testosterone's helping with all kinds of things. This is both men and women.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about guys
Right.
a little bit more specifically. But aside from the obvious that it helps men become men in terms of their development as they develop, it's developing the structures of the prostate and the penis. It's giving them the primary and secondary male characteristics, the deepening of the voice, the increased muscle and bone, all the things that sort of happen as men go through puberty and mature.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's the basics that I think most people generally get or understand. But then it goes into what happens once you're actually an adult. So now you're an adult male. What's testosterone doing for you? How's it changing things for you? And how is it functional for you as a guy ongoing, as an adult male? And so for testosterone for guys, it's definitely helping your brain. We've talked about this in other podcasts. There's a huge relationship with the structure of the brain, the ability for the brain to function, capture information, recall information, getting that word out of your mouth, from your brain out of your mouth. A lot of this has to do with testosterone. Spatial skills for guys. One of the reasons they sort of say in a cliched way that men have better spatial skills, in part, is because of testosterone and what that's doing.
Mood
Stability, serotonin,
emotional
dopamine, emotional flexibility, even to some degree, sort of openness,
right.
Assertiveness. This is a big thing too. We tend to think of testosterone as men being aggressive.
Right. This is so interesting.
Yeah, and it isn't aggression as much as it is assertiveness. Yes.
In fact, they find that low testosterone,
they're more aggressive in ways because cortisol becomes actually dominant in the presence of low testosterone, and that can be sort of a bad mix for actually being antisocial. Yeah. So social compatibility in general is really optimal levels of testosterone.
So, I mean, right there, that's a myth, no more, right? At least for our listeners.
I think so.
That's like...
And part of where all this comes out of is behavioral endocrinology. So we tend to think about, what are the benefits of testosterone? Again, we think about libido and helping by muscle and bone, heart and all of these things, that I'm getting my erections and all of those kinds of things we think immediately. But there is a huge body of research and understanding behind behavioral endocrinology and what that does to people in terms of testosterone or other hormones in their body, and how that affects their social interactions, et cetera, and their brain and how they're going to function in a society or whatever. So, yeah, that's testosterone kind of in a nutshell and how it's helping us.
So in other words, every aspect of being male.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, and some other things, we kind of made some notes here. Testosterone's declining, and we've known this now for years. In fact, I wrote a paper about this back I presented, when was that?
2017.
Yeah, all the way back in 2017. We went to
God, that was 6
London.
years ago.
Yeah, and presented on the global decline of testosterone and sperm in men.
Right.
And all I was doing there was just taking the research that was already being done and just sort of put it into a workable presentation,
Right.
for this conference that we went to. And I learned a lot by writing that paper, and I think a lot with the behavioral endocrinology side of it, where I understood the sort of mental, emotional, how it was helping patients, and having worked with patients for years. But
we were very physiologically focused.
Right. And this is definitely not just simply that. I mean, there's a physiology behind it, but it's a behavioral interaction on what testosterone can do. Like, here's one big thing. Men who have higher levels of testosterone lie less. So we tend to, the men and then the men lie. No, actually, if men are weak, they lie more. If they have optimal amounts of testosterone, they've done studies with this. They actually did a study where the men in the group, the various guys had to roll dice and then self-report their numbers to get a monetary reward. Now, here's the truth of it. Every guy lied. But when they tested, because it was like, well, I just had to roll, and I just tell them the number, and then I get this money. But the guys who had the higher testosterone lied less because they didn't feel they needed to, because when you have testosterone, you have a sense of resource to yourself that you can go out and obtain resources in
more
the environment. You're more self-reliant.
You're more self-assured.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you go, well, I don't need to lie. I don't need to bullshit my way through life.
And you're not proving things to others.
Exactly.
You're proving things to yourself.
Yeah. And I would say that's a pretty manly kind of concept. So
That's cool.
testosterone is actually helping with that. Just a quick side note, in women who barter better, like in trade, they have higher levels of testosterone. And I know
Why are you looking at me like that?
Well, because I know you really like to barter.
Haggle is like one of my hobbies.
Yeah, you're really good at it. So, we know you have very optimal levels of testosterone. Right. So anyway, that's back to these to guys and how there's this decline of testosterone. What are we seeing with that?
Which is really sad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a generational difference for the first time in history.
Well, I would say first time in history that we know of in terms of measuring it, because we have data going back 3 generations. So prior to that, we wouldn't really know. Now, we could have
I mean,
assumptions.
I guess we can say, perhaps with the comforts of an industrialized nation, there may have been a generational decline, but it wasn't checked back then.
And there's other, civilizations and all of that we don't really know. We can guess based on behavior and how people are acting, it's particularly men, on whether or not
and disease
testosterone.
processes.
Sure.
I mean, perhaps they weren't correlating heart disease and those kinds of things with testosterone, but now that we know them, we can extrapolate certain concepts.
Yeah, and I guess they could have done that. But speaking to what we do know over these past 3 generations, yes, we see a general decline of testosterone, also sperm health, sperm motility, and morphology. These things are changing over the past 3 generations. Now, I can say that in practicing for the past 18 years, when I first started doing this, I didn't have a lot of guys in their 20s coming in. Or if they did sort of make their way in because they thought it was testosterone, we checked their levels, and in the end, their levels really weren't the issue.
And the same to be said for fertility. I mean, I've had a lot more fertility patients later in my career than I did early on. And women are always thinking fertility issues are female related, but we know that 50% of the time, it's male.
Takes 2 to tango for sure. And with this issue of seeing this decline in sperm amount and the quality is definitely part of the equation for fertility in general.
So if testosterone is going down, men in general are less healthy.
I think they're less healthy. I think they're more confused in where their place is. And that's, I mean, we can certainly talk about the physical side of this. I have this tendency to want to talk about some of the mental, emotional, and even societal sort of impacts with all of this. But to the physical things, yes, the 3 big things for low testosterone guys are the disease risks are osteoporosis, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. And we see that in the aging male. As men get older and their testosterone levels go down, the risk for osteoporosis, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease is higher. And we do know there's plenty of research to show that as we optimize those levels and restore that, there's actually improvement in those, all of those.
Chronic inflammatory diseases.
Right, that inevitably those three
Yeah.
are sort of part of that. But yeah, all chronic inflammatory diseases would be generally improved if you're optimizing hormone. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the only thing. And of course, we approach everything very holistically. But if we're talking about testosterone and its sort of power, it's a big one with those disease processes. So if we're seeing a decline in testosterone, yeah, I think to your point, we're seeing an increase in these diseases.
Well, just for the sake of the listener, before we move on to that concept of the butterfly effect, which I think is part of why we enjoy this topic so much, just from a concrete level, what should men be getting tested and when? When should they be getting tested?
They should be getting tested right away. I think a guy in his 20s should have a baseline.
Yeah.
And he's got great levels and he's got great levels.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, he would have to necessarily do about it clinically, but at least he knows.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big thing too. Sometimes I'll see patients, their 40s and 50s, and their levels might be slightly low to our optimal ranges, but we don't actually know what their baseline was when they're in 20s. Because we know that testosterone can be, for some guys, as high as in the 2000s. We don't see that too often, but it is possible that certain men...
What's normal for them.
Yeah, exactly. Where we tend, the ranges tend to be right around, well, they can be as low as 200, that's a horrible range, all the way up to about 1100. We look at around 700 to 1100. But guys could have had maybe, 10, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 when they were younger.
Right.
So if they get that baseline in their 20s, now at least they know, and then they can make that relative to when maybe they're having symptoms.
Right, because if they were floating at 2,000 naturally, and now they're at 500, well, no wonder they're not feeling well.
Exactly.
And it's kind of like with bone health, with osteoporosis and osteopenia. We're not comparing the aging bone to other aging bones. We're comparing them to the bone density of a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old.
It's usually the baseline.
I think it makes sense. There's already precedent for hormones to be compared to our optimal range.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're exactly right. And then look at that. Are you a doctor? It's very true that they use, interestingly too, in most studies, they also use the college age male as a baseline of many different things when they're looking at all kinds of
The only time they're not using that is when you're coming in talking about yourself. And suddenly like what you were in college doesn't matter anymore.
Right, yeah, right. You have to live with it,
so
go ahead and
that's dumb.
suffer with that. Right.
Right, good.
So yeah, we don't look at it that way. We're looking for optimization.
Right. So get tested early.
Get tested
early.
Know your baseline. And then from there, continue to monitor over time.
And they're testing testosterone.
Total testosterone.
Estradiol.
Free testosterone, estradiol levels, I think. And then of course, we check the prostate to make sure that's healthy. Certainly if we're considering any kind of replacement. But total testosterone, free testosterone, estradiol, right off the bat. Now, total testosterone and free testosterone, they're a little bit different. The free testosterone is a unbound form of testosterone that actually can get into the cell to do work. Usually testosterone is floating around on a protein called sex hormone binding globulin, and that protein is actually binding up the testosterone, and that big protein testosterone glob cannot get inside the cell to actually change the cell to do work and to make you feel better. So the testosterone has to be freed up off of that transport system to do work. So we need to see the free testosterone levels, because sometimes guys will have decent total testosterone.
But it's not available.
It's not available.
Yeah.
The free testosterone is super low. So they'd have to see that. Then estrogen levels would have to be checked as well.
This idea of comprehensive labs is something we talk a lot about. I mean, if you're having these clinical decisions based on information that's inadequate. So that's one of the things we definitely want to make sure. You always say, be your own advocate, right? So for the listener out there are some basics that tell you the whole story. The rest of it is just not useful enough.
Right. And then getting that within the context of all your other labs. And that's how we usually approach it. We have multiple pages of labs that we would check on a brand new patient, and we're going to look at in a comprehensive, so contextual way of, let's say, their testosterone versus other things about their kidney and liver and other parts of their health. Red blood cell count, these kind of things can tell us all kinds of information. So that's
good.
The things to check. The estrogen is really important as well. I think over the years with estrogen, I have learned to be more conservative about being concerned about estrogen. Estrogen is important, guys. We need it too.
Right. And it's a natural process of converting testosterone into estrogen.
Absolutely.
That happens in every male.
Correct. And it has benefit for your brain. It has benefit for your bone. It has benefit for your libido. There needs to be a certain amount of estrogen for libido as well, and erectile function. However, that levels can certainly go very, very high, and then they can have the opposite effects. But there are ways to lower that estrogen medically. And then again, over the years, I've gotten more sort of conservative about how much I'm trying to aggressively lower the estrogen. Estrogen in excess can cause problems with the prostate. We know gynecomastia, enlargement of breast tissue for men. So we want to be careful with it, but it is not as prevalent of an issue that I would have thought earlier in my
It's
career
not to be
18 years
annihilated.
ago. Absolutely.
Keep a little estrogen
You
in your
need a little
life.
bit in your life for guys. And again, not so guys can sit there and just simply be, we
Excuse
would,
me.
typically say, well, is it going to be more emotional or whatever? It's not about that. There's actual physiological benefit to having some level of estrogen in the system.
Okay.
So we want to look at all of those things. Sometimes what can be important, since we're talking about the decline of testosterone and sperm, having a baseline sperm count is not a bad idea for any guy that's thinking about for the future, having children. So getting that baseline, understanding where it's at, and then maybe going through sort of therapy to be able to help with sperm count and morphology. And there's ways to be able to help with that too. So the testosterone's declining generation over generation, from sort of baby boomer to Gen X, now down to sort of millennial/Gen Z. We are seeing this overall decline. And why is that happening?
There's a huge incidence of endocrine disruptors that is affecting everybody. So male fetus getting affected by the mom in utero, the crap the baby's exposed to, then the toddler, blah, 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 until, even in middle age. Think about the material your underwear are made out of. Polyester, the frequency of polyester as a fiber is an actual sperm and testosterone reducer.
Yeah. There's this really brilliant woman, I forget her name at the moment, but she coined the term, anybody could look this up, coined the term obesogens. Obesogens. And she was one of the first people to say that these endocrine disruptors, but she called them obesogens initially, that there were certain chemicals, phthalates and plastics, polyester, that you're saying, the air we're breathing, the water we're drinking, there's so many different chemicals and things that are disrupting how our endocrine or our hormone system works. But she was saying, yeah, these are leading to obesity. And she put out a paper, and everyone just completely, all the conventional sort of wisdom, all laughed at her and said, no, that's insane. And, full circle, of course, this was all shown to be very, very correct, that it is increasing the deposition of fat, being able to hold on to that. All these chemicals are actually going into your fat and staying there,
and then you have
making it worse.
Sorry to interrupt, but you have that negative cycle where the more fat, the more you're converting testosterone to fat. The fatter you get, the more you're storing crap that further reduces your testosterone.
Absolutely. It's a collusion going in the wrong direction there. This is an issue with these endocrine disruptors. So we're finding that the testosterone and sperm issue is in part that, but that's only part of the puzzle. Some of this is just overall diet. So what is it that we're eating, or what are we not eating? Right. That is definitely a podcast.
Well, especially in this country. There's no secrets about the foods that are literally considered illegal
in other countries,
that we consume liberally in this country. Well, excuse me, we don't consume. And those are the kinds of things we'll continue to expose for you, so you can say, making those little steps can have quite a profound cumulative change in one's life.
Yeah, if I had to, just at the moment kind of attack anything, it would be soy. I think soy is probably this big push towards soy. Without question, gentlemen, this is affecting your testosterone. This is affecting libido. Soy is in the way it's being produced, in this sort of mass-produced, highly processed forms of soy, is definitely
right. That's a very extremely important clarification. Soybeans themselves as a food are not a bad food.
Or fermented soy.
They're actually a superfood. They really do carry all of these wonderful nutrients. But the minute you start making that into a tofurkey, That's a different story.
I never understood tofurkey. Why does it have to be in the shape of a turkey? Why can't they just say, I'm just going to have a chunk of tofu? Why does it have to be,
so yummy.
Reminiscent of the very thing they're saying they don't want to eat?
I don't know, but we can definitely talk about vegetarian diets. Don't put that quarter in me right now.
All right.
Focus on the negative effects of soy on men.
Well, just that. It has negative effects to testosterone.
Processed soy is no
Processed soy is probably largely what we're sort of talking about at the moment.
Yeah. Soy oil.
Soybean oil, which that's a whole other issue in and of itself too. The sort of soybean, sunflower, safflower, corn oil, rapeseed oil, which is canola oil, which that stuff is basically evil.
Yeah.
These things are high in omega-6, pro-inflammatory fatty acids that certainly would not be good for testicular health in leading into affecting testosterone and sperm.
And like with everything, just to clarify, because then people will say, oh, but there's conflicting information. It's actually not conflicting information. It's just, and we can touch on the notion of reductionistic, which people will hear us say that word. Omega-6 is not bad. Omega-9 is not bad. Omega-3 is not good. It's about ratios and frequency and exposure, just like most things in nature. So the problem is that there is a gross overconsumption and over-ingestion of 6s and 9s and not of the 3s.
The 3s, right. And 3s would be fish oil and those typical things we tend to think, fish oil. So, yeah,
so your diet is no good, your underwear are no good.
Right.
Being fat is no good.
It's increasing your estrogen naturally, which the more estrogen you have, that will actually send a negative feedback loop to the testicles to tell the testicles not to make testosterone. So getting lean is certainly going to be helpful for that. And we see more and more of that issue. Why are we seeing the decline over 3 generations? Well, we've seen an increase inevitably in obesity. And interestingly too, we've seen that with, come full circle back to the omega-6s and the seed oils.
Right.
We have seen an increase in the use of seed oils. That's when we started seeing a lot of these chronic diseases, and certainly obesity would be part of it. So, okay. So that's diet.
I mean, those are easy things people can do right now.
What are some other reasons why we're seeing a lack of testosterone generationally? And here's when I wrote that paper and did that presentation. So a lot of those things we just talked about there were sort of some of the obvious things that I had already kind of understood. But what was more enlightening for me at the time, and would still be, is this idea of, I guess, the war on masculinity itself in general in our society, that men cannot be men, and that where your actions go and your mind goes, so will your physiology. Right. So if
form follows function.
Correct. And that's what I don't think people are understanding enough of one of the key reasons why. If you and I are sitting and watching, I don't know, a sports contest or some kind of game, and your team wins and my team loses, your testosterone just went up and mine just went down. We weren't playing in the game. We were just simply watching it, but we were emotionally invested in the process. And we get either very excited about that or we get very upset about it. And these have negative effects on testosterone production, as an example. So again, form following function, vice versa. So where our mind goes, so will our function of our body. And so the war on masculinity, if men and boys are not allowed to be boys, if men are not allowed to be men, then they can't drive their own production of testosterone. If everybody gets a trophy, then how can there be a moment of triumph to drive your own testosterone and your own growth? Well, that's general growth too, but certainly testosterone levels at that moment. How can that be? And so, we're seeing the way boys are treated in schools. I've heard it coined as that boys are treated as defective girls.
So sad.
That, girls can sit there more easily than a boy can. They have all this energy. They actually have a response to testosterone. Boys and girls' testosterone levels, interestingly, are roughly about the same. But we can clearly see that boys are different from girls in how they act because their physiology is geared towards the response, the androgen receptor response to testosterone?
You're a man. Yes, you
I've been told.
So I see this is an important topic. But I really feel that the main champions for this are going to come from the females. And we don't have sons, but I'm surrounded by wonderful men in my life. I've been very lucky to say that. Great dad, great uncles, my brother, my husband. I mean, just good men. And if it weren't for those men, I don't think I would be the female that I am, nor do I think my daughters would be the girls that they are. It's paramount to have balance. If we talk about it for hormones and we talk about it for ingredients, why wouldn't we talk about it for the thing that's as most simplistic as masculine, feminine, male, female? This shouldn't even be a topic. It's extremely infuriating to me.
Well, there's a lack of polarity. If everything becomes sort of equal, then there isn't that sort of polarity that allows men and women to, I think, become the best versions of themselves.
And it's utterly dishonest, because even if you have a room full of women, you're going to have women with more testosterone and women with less testosterone. And guess what? They will divide themselves with skills that are based on those testosterone levels. So,
you're right about everything you just said there. And a little bit more, let's say, specific and granular to that is women produce the testosterone male. That was another big thing that I learned.
Right.
That was an in utero situation. That women with higher levels of testosterone in utero made the male fetus have higher levels of testosterone.
Right. It was not the sperm donor's
correct
testosterone level.
It was the mother.
Which is
the mother's
so
influence. Yeah.
Interesting and cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how a mother sort of approaches life that way too will certainly make a strong man. And so that's happening right in utero all the way up to
and
your
strong
point.
Women are in part shaped by strong men. That's not to say that strong women do not shape them. That's not the point. This is not a if this then not that. Right?
It's a balance.
It's a balance, and it's about the variety of what truly is found in nature. And this notion of nature versus nurture. We have a grandson. It's like the only male in the coven
of women.
And our 3-year-old daughter is playing with our 3-year-old grandson, almost 3, playing with horses. And my baby, who's by no means the most delicate flower.
No, she's a little
She's
Viking.
there with her horse prancing and it's eating grass and, smelling the flowers. My grandson starts throwing the freaking horses everywhere.
Smashing things.
Smashing them and knocking things over. It's not because
someone taught him to do that.
Someone taught him that. I mean, he's surrounded by females. Female nannies, female aunts, female cousins. It's all women. Where did that come from? Came from him. And great. And guess what? Eliana looked up and she's like, huh, that's kind of cool.
She get into it a little bit herself. Man,
she went and started giving him rules, which I guess is what women do. But that's all right too.
Women help to make men strong.
Yeah.
Men help to make women strong and complete in who they are. And I think that is that polarity. I remember, one of the things that we've done in our lives, we certainly played the game with Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
And we went to
Unleash the Power
Within and Date with Destiny.
Yeah.
And so we walked on fire. We did that whole thing. That was a whole adventure.
It was so cool.
In itself. It really is amazing to do that. And how everyone, I'd come back and I'd tell patients, I'd tell people, and they'd say, oh, did you get burnt a little bit? Because, we do it barefoot. And did you get burnt? No. They go, what? Like, they don't even understand.
It's almost like it's fake.
Right.
But it's not.
Right. No, it wasn't fake.
No.
It was very, very real. I remember thinking right before you were like super into it.
I was in the zone.
I was, for a quick second, I went, okay, what am I doing here? Where I thought, I'm usually like, go for it. And then for a quick second, right before I was like, and you were just like, yeah, let's do it. But anyway, we did it. It was a fantastic experience. Why do I bring that up? Because one of the things that Tony Robbins talked about was polarity. One of the things that he talks about in terms of relationship prowess and in-depth sort of power behind a relationship is the polarity between masculine and feminine energies. And that he even said that the masculine and feminine didn't have to necessarily come from the male or female. It just had to be what was natural to that man or woman if they had a masculine or feminine nature. But either way, that there had to be a polarity there. And it's usually polarity that very much draws people together in the first place. And that if they don't maintain and nurture that polarity, then that's when relationships start to fizzle. Yeah. So
I think there's a good dose of resentment. As a strong female, no, I won't speak about myself. Let me say generalized, although I would, this applies to me. How many women in my life, friends, acquaintances, patients, that are strong women think they need a male partner that is weaker than them? And I'm not talking about bench pressing. I'm talking about personality, perseverance, whatever. I would say a lot of them.
A lot of them what? Do or don't want?
They need.
They think they need that.
And then how many of those women are successful in their relationships? Not many. It's the opposite. If I'm strong, I need someone stronger. Because there is a certain level of resentment, I will say, that comes from the female that feels like she has to be the man in the relationship. Right. And again, that doesn't mean that you don't have strengths and weaknesses, but it's got to be true for men too.
Well, it is. And if the man is not stepping up and owning his own masculinity and the responsibilities of that, that's the other thing too. We're talking about masculinity. There is responsibility with that. If he's not taking that responsibility, then and being masculine, then inevitably it creates this vacuum, and women start to become more masculine, if it is not their nature, and then turn around, and then what does the guy have to do? Now he's got to become more feminine. And it's just, and it becomes, well, frankly, it becomes kind of grotesque when it's that way. There's nothing sort of sexually attractive.
Well, I mean, it sounds harsh, but it's true. There's not a lot of romance books written where, like, the guy has his gardening basket and is the one who changes all the diapers. Like, that's, I know, because I read a lot of these books. Okay, I open myself to being wrong. Maybe that's just a genre I am not attracted to. But I would love to know romance books, novels, I'm talking about fiction, that have a male character that's that way. I just don't think that's what's instinctually attractive to females.
It isn't, but
nor to other men.
It's certainly being put out there in media that it is that way, that, the girl boss and those kinds of concepts that, I have no issue with. I am surrounded by women.
Yeah.
I have very strongly, you and your whole family of women are very strong, independent, intelligent women. And I've seen it nothing but a strength. But the idea of not being able to allow that sort of masculine nature to be there in a relationship while a woman's still being strong is just wrong. It just doesn't work out in the long run.
No.
But they're being told, there's sort of bill of goods they're being sold often for many women, unfortunately, I think, is that.
That then is really synonymous with being alone.
And they are more and more. We're seeing less marriage. We're seeing less desire for children, or children much later, when often, unfortunately, it can be too late, because they've been sold that sort of thing early on, that they're supposed to do those things first and be strong without finding that sort of strong man with them.
Yeah. And, I don't know, I'm sure I'll be the one in every episode feeling the need to say, it doesn't mean you have to be married. It doesn't mean you have to have kids. Like, again, one thing doesn't exclude the other.
Well, you bring up a good point. A lot of this will always be about our perspective and our sort of worldview to some degree.
But it's not just our perspective,
Well,
John.
it isn't now, because it's a doctor.
20 years almost of seeing people through the door. What is the majority?
And being open to their perspectives and their ways of thinking.
Now, I will say there is consensus. There's a saying in Spanish, probably in English as well. I'd rather be alone than in bad company. Right? That I agree with. But I work with women and they don't want to be alone. Now, having your female, your village, all of that, so important. So important. But having a partner is a top priority, not just for you and I. Not just for you and me.
Grammar check. So what else could we say about this if we're talking more about the war on masculinity?
So does that mean we agree there's a war on masculinity?
Oh, I agree. I mean, I know that there is some type of pushback on that. It's very obvious, just regular, just sort of media is showing us this.
And I would like to say that I think the war on masculinity isn't really about men. It's about getting through to women. If you want to access the mind of a child, you got to get through its mom and grandmother and aunts and neighborhood. You want to access the females? Get the men out of the way.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about primitive behavior. So, is this really about men?
Well, we could argue to say it's about control. So if you can, get the men out of the way, then you get to the women in the way that they're doing, this certainly can control the situation. Everything's always about some level of control. We're talking about society. But back to the idea of like the food, the air, all these different things that are also part of this decline of testosterone and sperm. But things just as simple as saying fluoride that's found in tap water that most countries
found
now...
in tap water, find at the dentist and they charge you for it.
Well, right.
That's
a different story.
One thing about Arizona is we're, at least you and I, we have been very diligent and again, very lucky. I'm always quick to count my blessings. We've found some health practitioners that have worked with us. We never get an ounce of pressure from that at the dentist. But go ahead, say your thing on fluoride. Sorry.
I was looking at my notes here too.
Sorry, fluoride bad.
Well, yeah, fluoride bad. Not good for testosterone. Not good for a million things, for your brain. It dumbs you down. And most countries now have just, they think it's absurd. They just get rid of it. I mean, it's an industrial waste product.
And a reminder, that's testosterone for the boys and girls.
Right, yeah.
Don't get the fluoride at the dentist.
And not just testosterone, but now we're talking about hormone disruptors across the board.
Yeah.
I think we kind of largely covered what we wanted to there, except one thing that I just think is a great, maybe we can end on this.
Okay.
If men ejaculate 21, I think this is a fantastic stat. If men ejaculate 21 times in a month, it decreases their prostate cancer risk by 20+%.
That's pretty significant.
That was 32,000 men over 18 years.
Oh, that's a great study.
That was a pretty good, pretty robust study. So, yeah. I mean, that's a promotion for sex.
This is extremely important for me to distinguish. Ejaculate is not the same thing as masturbate. So this is how we talk about get those quickies in.
Yeah.
Right. So 21 times a month. I mean, that's what, 5 times a week?
Yeah, exactly. 5 times a week. And a little bit more.
How many people out there can say that they're having intimate relationships 5 times a week? They're lying.
Well, we have found that
that's a lie.
That's usually not the case. But again, then there's, for men, masturbation would be included in that.
Yeah.
I mean, the number's the number. And
right. Okay. So again,
it's a 21 gun salute there. Day. 21 times in a month. That's the prescription for today.
So that's important. Men be men.
Men be men.
Don't stereotype it and say that's bad. It's bad for you. Even though the Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, would say that the more you ejaculate, the more you lose pieces of your
jing,
essence.
Your jing is the essence, the kidney essence, the jing.
That's not good either.
So they would say to sort of hold on to that. So there's a little bit of a conflicting philosophy there to some degree.
Some people just stopped listening after you said that stat. They're like, I heard what I needed to hear.
Right. 21 times I'm allowed, the doctor said. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to say in summary?
Men, masculinity, manliness, chivalry,
responsibility,
purpose, protection. I mean, so many beautiful words. It's almost like, an elementary school poem that you're supposed to write. These are important parts of every human's life experience.
And certainly every man's. And I think all those things that you just said there would be part of, back to form and function, driving testosterone, allowing that to sort of literally unfurl. So making sure we're eating the way we need to optimize testosterone, make sure we're living the way we need to live to optimize
Read your
testosterone.
labels,
Yeah.
including your clothes labels, right? Promote your testicles.
Go testicles. I love you.
I love you too.